What is up, Bills Mafia? Happy Monday evening. Welcome into another episode of the Shout Football Podcast covering your Buffalo Bills. This is our second straight week now since training camp started. We're going to be doing these Monday mini podcasts. And Ryan, it just so happens that we have quite a bit to dive into. Brandon Beane, Sean McDermott with their introductory training camp press conferences yesterday, Jordan Poyer, Josh Allen today. And then, oh, by the way, we have ourselves a new offensive lineman that we all get to talk about and dive into. How are you, my friend?
Hey, I'm doing well. You're right. Plenty to talk about with this Bills team.
So the Bills, if you haven't heard quite yet, have signed Brian Winters, who was unceremoniously released yesterday by the New York Jets. So very Brandon Beane-like signing. Go out there and get yourself a division rivals, trash for lack of a better term. I mean, they kicked him to the curb yesterday, but a lot of that had to do with the fact that he was owed $7.5 million this season. They can recoup that entire amount. There's no dead cap hit on the release. So it made a little bit of sense. I was actually reading some New York writers who said they were expecting this to happen earlier in the offseason, that they were surprised that it took them this long. But I think they probably wanted to get through, maybe get their guys in the building, get a read on the offensive line, and then go from there. But for the Bills, Jon Feliciano, their starting right guard, 16 games last year, he suffered a torn pectoral muscle while training just to get into the building, get himself back into shape after suffering a rotator cuff injury last year. So he was on the verge of coming back, suffered the injury, is going to be out 2 to 3 months. So Brandon Beane goes out there, gets himself a new guy to throw in the mix, the competition, because I don't know what you think about this, Ryan, but I think this is a guy that will compete, but I don't think I'm really ready to hand him the right guard job just quite yet.
No, and I agree with that. I will say that once we see the terms of his contract, I think that'll give us a better feeling on whether or not he's going to be maybe not handed the job, but maybe the favorite for the job. If the Bills signed him to a decent deal, or maybe it's going to be incentive laden, who knows? I think we'll have a better grasp of it there. But that's one thing I'm really interested in, because maybe he just signed for the vet minimum, or maybe he signed for something low just so he could stay within the division and kind of maybe stick it to his former team. But upon the signing, it's kind of deja vu all over again with that Spencer Long signing from a year ago. Same type of deal where the Jets let him go because, again, it was one of those situations where it was based on the amount of money that he was going to be receiving. And the same thing here. They didn't feel comfortable paying Winters that much money, $7.5 million, as you mentioned. So now the Bills at least bring in some more competition, whether it's Long, whether it's going to be Darrell Williams, who knows? But you're right. He's not going to be handed the starting job first and foremost. And second, it doesn't mean that he's going to keep the job when Jon Feliciano returns.
Yeah, and I think that what this does is, for Brandon Beane, who's such a great tactician when it comes to approaching a season, building the roster in the offseason, then and giving yourself some flexibility in terms of how you want to manipulate that roster once you get towards things. It's a little bit different this year because we're dealing with no preseason games, a very shortened training camp situation, 2 weeks basically of practices for them to evaluate what they want to do here. But there's plenty of overflowing talent that I think teams around the league, depending on what happens with COVID and also what happens just with, needs, injuries, like wanting to fill certain holes. I mean, if Brandon Beane now wants to turn around and maybe trade an offensive lineman to bring back an asset, he's now created even more depth along that offensive line because, you bring Feliciano back in 3 months, you figure. He has some real great position flexibility, which they love. And Brian Winters has had experience playing on the right and left side, predominantly the right side the last couple of years. But everywhere you look on this offensive line, there's depth and versatility, and that's never a bad thing.
No, never. And there's probably going to be one or two people that get traded close to the regular season, just like last year where Bean was able to work that magic. What's really interesting to me is that the Bills wasted no time in making this signing. And Brandon Bean laid it out yesterday, the timelines for how this works with new players. Even though they've signed Brian Winters, we're probably talking about 5 days before he can even step foot into the building, between having to have the COVID tests and everything else. It's an official move, but we're still not going to see him at One Bills Drive here for at least a few days, probably closer to a week.
So yesterday, like we mentioned, Bean and McDermott with their press conferences, and it was pretty much more of the same from the two of them as it goes with dealing with this season and this shortened training camp. Yeah, you'll hear some background noises. My kids are playing in the background, but this shortened season and what that means for practices. I mean, it, Sean said it, 500 plus reps that players are going to miss, no preseason games to get ready. And Jordan Poyer, who's a veteran, spoke today about, yeah, it's still going to stink a little bit not to have a preseason game to maybe, knock a little bit of the rust off, because the only real practices that they're going to have, or dress rehearsals, I should say, are those training camp potential scrimmages. And some of the things that Brandon Bean talked about, and I want to talk about Cody Ford in a minute, but one of the things that I thought was interesting from Brandon's press conference was talking about what the Bills are going to have to do to create those situations where they can evaluate their players. So whether it be, maybe putting their heads together as a coaching staff. Sean talked about this too, about devising ways to make it feel like a game. But at the end of the day, like Jordan said, it's going to be the Bills versus the Bills. It's not going to be quite the same. So I think that there's a lot missing in that week 1 game against the Jets. Could be a bit sloppy, putting it nicely.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say, because again, Jordan Poyer was talking about tackling today, and how what used to take 4 weeks might take 8 weeks now. And no offense to the Bills, but I think tackling was one of their weaknesses at times last year. You go back and look at like that Eagles game and things like that. Poor tackling led to some of those losses, so that's going to be interesting to see. But on the same side, think about all the moves that the Bills made this offseason. They're not going to be depending on a lot of inexperienced players, a lot of rookies. They have a lot of veterans in the building, a lot of players that came from Sean McDermott's system in Carolina. The biggest move that they made this offseason, obviously trading for Stephon Diggs. They're not depending on a rookie wide receiver to fill those reps. So, at least the Bills kind of maybe saw a little bit ahead of time what could happen. And that's why a lot of these moves that they made a few months ago could really pay dividends, especially when you look at the landscape now and you look at the AFC East and the opt-outs on the Jets and the Jamal Adams trading, the 8 Patriots that have already opted out. All of a sudden things are looking to be in Buffalo's favor once again. But there's going to be those situations like you mentioned where the Bills are not going to be heading into week 1 with a full preseason. The only silver lining there is every team is in the same boat as the Bills in that situation.
100%. Going into today, I think one of the big takeaways that we had from Sunday, and even early this morning when Sean McDermott appeared on WGR 550 to talk with Howard Simon and Jeremy White, was the potential of maybe Cody Ford moving inside, and where maybe his best fit in year 2 would be. I mean, we're more than a year removed from when the Bills drafted Cody Ford, and I think a lot of the questions right off the bat were, okay, where's this guy going to fit in? And Brandon Bean, I remember the night of the draft, did say that they envision him long-term as a right tackle. And I think that this move in a lot of ways continues to, reinforce the fact that I think even though the dialogue coming from the team, even to this day, a year later, has been, position flexibility, we'll try him at guard, maybe we'll try him at tackle, we'll see. I still think long-term they see him as a right tackle. And now you see Winters thrown into the mix, even without Feliciano. You have Darrell Williams, who could play, right guard, who I think played at right guard more than any other position last year, maybe left guard, one of the guard spots. You have Spencer Long, who was there last year, has a little bit of experience at center too. Evan Boehm, who could play guard, Ike Bucker, who can play guard, even Tyne Secchi, who a lot of people think of as a swing tackle. He has played some guard in the past for the Washington football team. So I think that this move to me tells me that while I wouldn't completely throw out the idea of Cody Ford, getting some reps at right guard and them trying it out, what it tells me is that I think they really, really want to give him another go at right tackle.
Yeah, what a difference about 10 hours makes. WGR this morning, Sean McDermott was asked about Cody Ford in terms of playing. Is he a guard or is he a tackle? And he said, that's a good question. He couldn't really answer that. But like you said, I think this Winters signing kind of speaks to the depth that they already had at the position, and now the further talent that they've added. I think that's a good sign for Ford in terms of playing right tackle this year. And I think the Bills would have been foolish to maybe abandon the right tackle possibility here a little bit too soon. Let him see what he has, especially early on in the season. I would like to see him play the entire second season at right tackle before you make any I guess I would say before you kind of judge him too soon, because you have to remember last year he was in the college playoffs, and you're going into the pro days, you're going into the visits, you're going into a lot of the workouts and things like that. So he never really had a true off season. He was injured this year at the end of the year, had surgery, but you're going to probably see a much different Cody Ford, in my opinion, in year 2 versus year 1. He knows about the speed of the game. He's experienced that now. He knows maybe what he needed to work on the most at that tackle position. I'm guessing that's what he's really put that time and effort into this offseason. So don't rush to judgment. Give him the second season at right tackle before you kick him inside or think about doing it. But you're right. I mean, there still might be some snaps where he gets thrown in there, especially if they're confident in Darrell Williams and Ty Nsekhe possibly playing right tackle. But again, I think this is good news for Cody Ford in terms of that Brian Winters signing.
If you are watching, this is available to you on Facebook or YouTube, wherever you are watching live. We really appreciate it. This is the Shout Football Podcast covering the Buffalo Bills. He's Ryan Talbot. I am Matt Parrino. We're introducing our Monday mini pods. We'll be on here for about 20, 30 minutes every Monday, just to react to whatever's going on around the Bills. And then Wednesday is still going to be our big live show, and we have one heck of a guest this week. Joe Buscaglia from The Athletic is going to come on here. We're going to dive into the training camp as things get kind of ratcheted up at One Bills Drive. You've seen some pictures tweeted out from the Bills today. Josh Allen throwing the ball to Stephon Diggs a little bit. I'm sure we're going to start to see videos coming up. But if you have a question or you want anything specifically covered on these mini pods or even on Wednesday nights, I try to do my best to kind of follow along in the comments section. Forgive me if we don't get it to anything. And if I ever don't get anything, definitely hit up Ryan and myself in our DMs. Let me know. We're always open to chat about the Bills. John, I got your question up here, my man, watching over on Facebook. Thoughts on Vegas with the announcement that no fans in 2020. Well, if I had it right now, I would post a tear emoji, because that would be me getting a chance to go back to where I lived for 5 years before coming back to Buffalo. I'm very disappointed. I wanted to get back there, but it doesn't look like traveling is going to be really even possible in 2020 with everything that's going on in the country. So it's definitely a sad situation. And yeah, I hope everybody didn't have their trips booked, because that would be a real sad development.
Yeah. So if I read that read that correctly, it said he already had the trip booked though, so he's still going to be heading there, just not to the game. Is that correct?
Thoughts on Vegas with you? Oh, I read that wrong.
Still be there. My trip.
Oh, there you go. Look at John. Get out there to Vegas. Okay, I don't hate it.
Take those $400 that you would have paid for the nosebleeds, head to the craps table, play some blackjack. Maybe you can double that, or maybe you can even pay for that trip. You won't be able to experience that game in what looks like an amazing stadium, but try to have some fun while you're out there, I guess.
Yeah, and definitely if you're going to go out there, hit up Naked City Pizza. I know you probably are going from Buffalo, and you probably get all the Buffalo pizza and wings that you can handle, but they're great Buffalo pizza and wings out there. The owner, Chris Palmieri, is an awesome dude. Yeah, John says it's going to be a vacation for him, so we're excited about that. Enjoy. But we're excited about this season. I mean, we're kind of, it was a little bit murky waters last week as baseball, started to really struggle with some outbreaks, and we're just kind of the tip of the iceberg here. We don't really know what this is going to look like in another week or two, and once the pads go on and practices start. But we had a chance to talk to Jordan Poyer today, and Jordan was a breath of fresh air after an off season that has been, when you get to the 8 months of it without football. The last time we had to talk about anything football related, it was Houston. So the monotony of the offseason kind of catches up with you after a while. And I thought Jordan today, kind of getting back in the building, giving us an update on what this virtual offseason period has been like. And it just seemed like, I've spent a lot of time over the last 2 years talking to him, but he really seems completely comfortable in his role as a leader on this defense now. And they're going to need some guys to step up on that side of the ball. I mean, Lorenzo Alexander is not around anymore. He was a big piece of that locker room culture, leadership vibe. I know they have high hopes for Tremaine Edmonds and different other guys on this defense, but I think Jordan Poyer is a guy that, well, I don't think he's like necessarily a speech guy. He's definitely a guy that everybody looks up to, in almost a different way than Micah Hyde, because I think he's a little bit more animated, a little bit more vocal. And some of the things that he talked about today, I mean, if you're a Bills fan, you probably I would definitely recommend going to listen to Jordan Poyer, and that's my dogs in the background. I apologize. Come here, Paul. What we deal with filming these things from home. But I think that Jordan talking about, what they did as a defense to kind of get on the same page, all these potential new pieces. I wrote about it on the site the other day. By the way, Syracuse.com, NewYorkUpstate.com, have it over there right now. We have a bunch of stuff today. I think we put up like 8 or 9 articles, something like that. There's been a lot to unpack over the last couple of days, so get it all over there. But the Bills could potentially have 5 new starters on defense this year. I mean, you figure Ed Oliver is probably going to slot in as their starting 3-tech, where Jordan Phillips ended the year as a starter last year. Mario Addison has the potential seat, Trent Murphy. Then AJ Klein's probably going to take over for Lorenzo Alexander or whoever's in that role, potentially Josh Norman, potentially a new slot corner maybe, and defensive tackle Star Lotulelei is no longer going to play this season. So there's potential for a bunch of new pieces. But Jordan Poyer today said, listen, we got together in Virginia and it was like we didn't skip a beat.
Yeah, that was really encouraging. I really liked what I heard from him in terms of the leadership aspect, how he talked about early in his career. Some players in Cleveland kind of took him under his wing, and he's kind of now doing that as he's one of the locker room leaders. But maybe the most encouraging thing, if I'm a Bills fan, is hearing why he decided to play this year. He said he knew, expectations for this year were high, and he wanted to be part of something special here. So he didn't want to miss out on that. I think the players in the locker room know, just like a lot of the fans on the outside know, that there are raised expectations in 2020, not just to win the division for the first time since 1995, but to make a legitimate run in the AFC. So he's on board with that. I do still love the leadership that they have at all 3 levels, especially bringing a guy like Addison on the defensive line, some young guys at the linebacker position, but you even have Klein who knows that defense well, and obviously in the secondary.
And I posted a comment up there, and this is something that you emailed me about this morning. Poyer and Hyde, and just the disrespect and maybe how underrated they are as a safety tandem. This is something you wanted to talk about a little bit.
Yeah, he actually touched upon that today when he was asked about it. He said, it's not for something for us to talk about, to kind of bring to the forefront. He says that they obviously notice it. He'll retweet some things. He'll put some things on social media. And he even noted that things like that fuel him. So, if that's what we need, if you need more bulletin board material, maybe it's a good thing that a lot of these sites are going with the bigger names, the players from the bigger franchises, so to speak. Buffalo doesn't get a lot of national pub, a lot of national love necessarily. So I think a lot of people are missing out on that Poyer and Hyde combination. And alone, they are both very good players. But I think it's the two of them together, how well they mesh together, is what makes that duo so special. So, yeah, they probably are disrespected in the grand scheme of things. There are some players that kind of are still getting by, maybe by reputation, or groups that are getting by reputation ahead of those two. But, if it fuels them and it kind of adds to their fire, so be it.
One thing that I think really popped for me during Brandon Beane's press conference yesterday was when he got into the weeds a little bit on the practice squad, because why I think the practice squad is so pivotal this year, plays a real pivotal role in teams' roster structure and strategy, is that things were going to change anyway, but additional adjustments have been made in light of COVID with the practice squad. We're talking about no preseason games. So a bunch of undrafted free agents, young players, late draft picks. It's going to be an uphill battle to make a roster. So, with what's happened now, and we'll explain it a little bit here in a minute, I think that a lot of these players are going to have more opportunity as the season progresses to not only stay on rosters and stay on practice squads with the additional spots, but also have a chance to really play meaningful football. So basically, practice squads when the collective bargaining agreement was agreed upon, it was going to go up from 10 players to 12 players, right? Now with COVID, it's getting pushed up 4 more spots to 16 players. And in years past, you had to have at least 2 years of accrued NFL experience. If you had more than that, you weren't eligible to be on the practice squad. But they're getting rid of that idea for 6 players of the 16. So technically speaking, I used the example in the story today. You could have Matt Barkley and Jake Fromm fighting it out for the backup quarterback spot, and you want to keep Jake Fromm because you don't want to take the chance that somebody's going to sign him, just to use it as an example. You can then cut Matt Barkley, put him on your practice squad if you're not worried about him losing him, and you can stash him on your practice squad because you get 6 players without restrictions in terms of NFL experience time to place on your practice squad. So I think they're doing the best that they can to kind of adjust for the challenges that teams are going to face and give them a little bit more flexibility here.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so valuable to have some guys that have legitimate NFL experience that can be waiting there in case there's an outbreak or in case one person tests positive, that you're not going with an undrafted free agent having to promote them or having to sign a guy on Monday and not even have them practice with the team and throw them into the lineup on Sunday. There's going to be some players that they can ultimately stash, but the only part that kind of disappointed me is the quote unquote protected players. There's supposed to be 4 players that can get protected on a week by week basis. The Bills technically could choose the same 4 players all year, but Brendan Bean shed some light on that yesterday, where he said there's a 48-hour window every single week where those protected players aren't protected. Teams can claim them. So, going back to your Jake Fromm, maybe Fromm can't go on the practice squad at all this year because if there's a team that says, we kind of liked him, we just couldn't draft him this year, we had bigger needs, they could try to take him and put him on their main roster or something like that. When I initially had heard about the protected player list, I thought, oh, that could be great. A guy like Fromm could sit there. The Bills can't lose him. They could only go with 2 QBs. So, it's protected in a sense on a week by week basis. Oh, we might need an extra defensive tackle. This person's protected, but no player is truly safe on that practice squad on a week by week basis because another team could end up poaching them.
Exactly. And Mark asked if Duke Williams could be stashed in the practice squad. Still a fan of his size and skill set. And I think a lot of fans still are. I mean, we saw, I try to be realistic in the way that we approach covering this team. And I don't ever want to give, false hope or even, in our evaluations or our analysis, kind of talk about a player in a way that we don't actually believe. And, as much as I love Duke Williams and Christian Wade, I think that they both have uphill battles to make this roster. And that's okay because you know what? Neither one of those guys are draft picks. I mean, Christian Wade's over here on the International Pathway Program, just trying to learn how to play the game of football. But Duke Williams, I mean, there's real potential there. You know what I mean? I think that the Bills kind of got lucky in getting a chance to sign him and then develop him last year. Obviously, I think he was thrown into a role that was a little bit too much for him in Houston, but he's a guy that, yeah, I think they'll be able to not only stash him, but again, continue to develop him. And that gives you some protection in case guys that you've invested in with draft picks now, Isaiah Hodgins, Gabe Davis, don't work out in the long run.
Yeah, Mark, I think that Duke, answering your question, is a perfect practice squad candidate. He's not extremely young. Again, you're not going to put an Isaiah Hodgins on your practice squad now because rookie, a good size, things like that. So Duke Williams doesn't have the age working in his favor. He obviously had that CFL experience, so he has some experience. He played with Buffalo last year, knows their playbook, can be promoted or could be brought up on a week-to-week basis, and he knows the system. So, yeah, he's one of those veteran players that I think is perfect for the practice squad. A guy that another team wouldn't necessarily poach because you're looking for younger guys that you can develop, that you can kind of bring along with your team on a week to week, but obviously year to year basis when you're taking these guys off of other teams. So yeah, Williams is definitely a candidate and a name to watch for that practice squad for Buffalo.
Certainly. Well, this has been a great short episode of the Shout Football Podcast. We want to get on here, give you guys a little bit of reaction today's signing. I think it's going to be a few more days of walkthroughs and very, very slow, socially distanced install at One Bills Drive. So we're hoping next week at some point, media will be able to get back out there. We'll see as this thing progresses. I think we're going to get a lot more players this week in terms of press conferences. So make sure you keep it locked on to Syracuse.com, NewYorkUpstate.com for all the coverage from that. He's Ryan Talbot. I'm Matt Parrino. This has been the Shout Football Podcast. Make sure you tune in Wednesday night because the man, Mr. Joe Biscaglia, over 100,000 followers, Mr. Bills beat reporter extraordinaire, is going to join the show, and we are going to break things down. All your questions, everything you want to talk about, training camp stuff, position battles, who's going to make this roster. I'm not going to have my 53-man roster projection out yet. I think I'm going to wait till right before the padded practices start to deliver that thing. But Nicholas asks, is Joby still alive? He is alive. He is back from vacation, and he's going to stop in on Wednesday night. We're going to do this damn thing. So thank you so much for joining us. Tune in Wednesday night. We will see you then. He's Ryan Talbot. I'm Matt Parrino. Thank you so much.